Greetings and welcome. We are in Freshman English. And our objective now is to study closely the language at the conclusion of Act 1 when R and J meet for the first time. Okay, now you've been doing a little bit of work, kind of studying, analyzing the language. Now we're ready to go to work with that language. And we'll begin by studying specifically what it is Romeo does and says. Now, he's already spoken about Juliet's beauty. You can backtrack a little bit from 828 to 827 and see. Romeo has said something about Juliet's beauty. What did he say about a jewel in an Ethiop's ear? Did you see that? What was that all about? What's he talking about? He says she burns, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. What does that mean? Well, see, I mean, if you'll think about it, this will kind of blow your mind. Today, in our culture, if a guy sees a girl and says about her, she's hot, he doesn't mean she has a fever. Like, oh, I need to get her some aspirin, she's not feeling well. No. What does it mean to say if a guy says she's hot? What does that mean? Good or bad? Yeah. It's very good, right? In other words, he means what when he says she's hot? She's attractive. She's beautiful. Now, hello, if you'll think about it, there is absolutely no connection, really, between a girl's physical beauty and the concept of hot. I mean, if you'll think about it, and I've said this before, and sometimes freshmen go, I'll be danged, he's totally right. There is no real connection between those two things. I mean, he could have, a guy could just as easily say about a girl who is stunningly beautiful, she's cold. I mean, if you'll think about it, see, you're going to go, no, those two things don't work. They only don't work because of Shakespeare. Are you ready for this? Now to your notes. Shakespeare invents the concept that girl's beauty equals hot. She doth teach the torches to burn bright is to say she's hot. She glows, right? She's physically beauty. But that's all stuff he just says to himself that Tybalt overhears, and then Tybalt's ready to kill him. And ironically, of course, we know how that one ends up later. Now he's ready to talk specifically to her, and he walks up to her and he says, if I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, my lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Now, let's just say it out loud, as already has been said. He walks up to a girl he does not know on the dance floor, and within 4 lines, he says, not, what's your name? Not, who are you? But, can we kiss? Now, he uses, though, and we're not done. We're not done. Right. He uses the word kiss, but kiss means to come together. That's all the word means. So, for example, billiard balls or bowling balls or whatever, often are referred to as pool, the two balls kissed. In other words, all that means is, we even use that language, for example, if we're talking about a car that hits the side railing, we'll sometimes say it kissed the side railing. All it means is touching. Kiss means only to touch. But of course, kiss is sexual language. So when he uses the word kiss, wait, we're not done. What is this thing about shrine? No. I'm asking literally, what is a shrine? It's like notice the language. Yeah. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, you've even got a sidebar to help you here.
It's a place where you worship.
Yeah. Are you ready for this? Romeo joins religious talk. Shrine and pilgrims is religious language with sexual language, the kiss. He brings them together. Romeo brings them together on the floor of the dance floor, right? Where Juliet's been dancing, okay? And he's ready to talk religion, theology, and sexuality with her all in the same time. All right? Now go back and look at it again. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, my lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. In other words, he uses language that seems to suggest, I'm probably screwing this up, and the only way I know how to fix it is to give you a kiss. Juliet, interestingly, and it says a lot about her, that she doesn't do one of these numbers, how dare you, nor does she lecture him outright, but rather she's able to play a linguistic game as well. Let's point out, Shakespeare loves to play linguistic games, language games. This is a language game where a guy walks up to a girl and he wants to immediately start playing language games. Most girls might say back, what did you just say? I don't even completely understand what you just said. Dude, are you asking me to kiss you, or do you want to talk religion and about pilgrims go on these journeys, these long journeys where they go to holy shrines and all of that? Look how she responds. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much with mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. And usually she'll put up her hand and she'll say, let's touch hands. Now, why? Because if you went on pilgrimage, you went to like Jerusalem, where you went to holy sites where saints are, and you touch those holy sites with your hand, right? So she plays a game back to him and she says, oh yeah, let's play pilgrimage and let's do it with our hands. In other words, she'll put her hand up. Romeo, notice, however, isn't done. He's like, no, 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 you missed it. I am not just interested in touching your hand. Notice what he says, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? In other words, even people who go on pilgrimage need to kiss, right? To which she says, I, pilgrim. Notice, Juliet can play the game just as well as Romeo. You have a situation here where Romeo thinks he can win her through language. She defeats him through language as well, and in the process they both fall in love. Now, look at what Juliet says back. I, pilgrim, in other words, yeah, they do have lips. Pilgrims have lips they kiss. Lips they must use in prayer, which is a classic shoot down. In other words, yeah, I'm not interested in talking about lips kissing. I'm interested in talking about lips saying prayers to God. That's what pilgrims are supposed to do. That's what saints do. In other words, yeah, let's say a prayer together. Notice Romeo, though, is not dissuaded. Notice what he says. Oh, then, dear saint, now he's equating Juliet not only with a shrine, but with a saint. Let lips do what hands do. They pray. Grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. In other words, I'll lose my faith in God if you don't let me give you a kiss. Okay, he says it this way. Let's not let our lips kiss. Let's let our lips pray together. How's that sound? Okay, he's like, I can go there with that language. That's fine. Okay, so we're not going to kiss. Our lips are going to pray together. Do you have a problem with that? Notice Juliet. She's not dissuaded. It's quite remarkable. She's not like, how dare you? Or, I'm not talking to you because it's really freaky that I don't even know you and you'd come up and start having this conversation, right? She's ready to continue. And look what she says. Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. What do you think this means? Read your sidebar to try to figure out what's going on.
I'm not going to kiss you, but you can kiss me.
What's that? What does she say? How does she respond to him? How would you put it in your own words?
She's not going to kiss him, but he can kiss her.
I am not going to engage in this activity, but I'm not going to tell you that you can't. Which is interesting because that's ostensibly saying to him, what?
Go for it.
I'll serve kind of like a holy shrine that a pilgrim would kiss, and I'm just going to stand here. In other words, I'm going to allow this, but I'm not totally allowing it. Okay? Romeo says, then move not while my prayer's effect I take. He kisses her. And then he says, thus from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged. In the same way that if you went and kissed a holy relic, you would be, as a Catholic, you would be then forgiven. Of course, let's just pause for a moment and let's just say it out loud, the genius of the author. Wait a minute. This is a play about kissing, and more particularly, the final kiss, which will, of course, be the all-important kiss that will happen Where? Not in church. In the tomb, next to the church. In a mausoleum, right? Remember? In a crypt. Where? Remember? Juliet will try to kiss Romeo's lips to get the poison. Romeo will have already kissed Juliet's lips as the very last moment he is alive. So in other words, they will meet with kissing, they will end with kissing, and of course in between there's also a little bit of kissing. We won't get into that yet. That's a scene that obviously is coming, right? Notice, it's interesting, after he kisses her, we're not done with this scene quite yet. Look what she says. And there's a lot of debate about what this means. She says, "You kiss by the book."
Boring.
That's a legit kiss.
Now, that is an interesting observation. What's your sidebar tell you about this? And they have to be careful because they're writing for freshman students, so they can't give away too much as the editors of this volume. There are two meanings to this. One is thumbs up, the other is thumbs down. The thumbs down rendering is kissing by the book here means you haven't done this enough, clearly. You don't really know what you're doing, do you? In other words, you've read about it in a book. You kind of have seen, okay, you're supposed to do it this way. And so that's what, as opposed to, you know, if you really knew what you were doing, that would be a different kind of kiss. The other answer to this, however, is that there were manuals already published in Shakespeare's day, go figure, by the Italians. They know a thing or two about love and kissing, where they already had written books that detailed in specifics all kinds of different types of sexual activity, including, of course, kissing. And to that degree, kiss by the book means you're pretty educated in this. You clearly have made a study of this. That is to say, you're clearly somewhat experienced in all of this. And then, right away, the nurse steps in. Now, let's point this out for your notes before we finally listen to this part of our, and finish Act 1. About every time in this play, two young people decide they want to get together. Whether it be to kiss, hook up, whatever. Have a conversation, whatever. Almost always, an adult steps in and disrupts it. Almost always. In fact, you could argue that for the entire play, the young people are constantly trying to get together, but it's like magnets that are being held apart. And what's holding them apart is almost always the older, the aged, the adults. Yes. So you'll have the young people who are always trying to kind of get together, and then you've got old people that are kind of pulling them apart. So that you could make the argument, when they finally do get together, you know how they've been pulling, they come very close to, it's like they clash together. They don't come nice and gently together. Boom. And of course they wreck everything. You could make the argument that the reason everything gets so jacked up is because the young people are never allowed to have the time. Why does this kind of seem to happen so compressed so quickly? Well, obviously it's not like you can go up and just kiss a girl on the dance floor. Ah, yeah, by the way, what kind of party is this? What does a masquerade mean?
With masks.
They all show up with masks, and the goal here, of course, was to try to convince people that you were somebody other than who you were. That's why you wore the masks. Of course, we're giving this lecture just a few days away from Halloween, and the question, obviously, for Halloween time is, why wear the masks and all of that? Of course, that's a fascinating part of this play that we can't get into in a lot of detail. The notion that this is a play about masking, about hiding, about using language to hide. Notice Romeo doesn't just come up and say, I think you're really hot, I want to give you a kiss. He uses religious language. Hey, can we go to church? Are you okay with going to church? And she's like, yeah, I can do church. Good, because this is what I'm going to define church as now, giving you a kiss. I don't know that I would call that going to church, but I'm not going to not go to church. See how, right? And then all of a sudden, so she'll stand there and let him kiss her kind of thing, all right? Go.
Is that where the masquerade balls came from? When
Of course. And this is a very popular form of entertainment, first by the Italians and then later, of course, by the English, where you put a mask on and then you showed up to the party and then people tried to guess who you were by your deportment or whatever, because you had masks on. And these masks and these costumes could get really elaborate. So, for example, if you're going to see a film version of Romeo and Juliet, it's always interesting to see how do they stage this. So, for example, do they have full masks? so that you really cannot see. Or the problem is you got to hear Romeo and Juliet talk. So a lot of times you'll see a half-face mask that will cover their eyes, for example. And when we look at the most famous film version of this play, the Zeffirelli film version, you'll see kind of how they play that game. In the DiCaprio version, there is nothing guarding the face. The face is all, but there's costumes. They're wearing costumes and the like. I'm sorry? That's right. So, for example, you can see here, and note the irony of the Leonardo DiCaprio film version on 829. Notice no masks, but you do notice that she's wearing angel's wings, which plays nicely into the religious language that has just been shared. Notice the nurse will interrupt. I'll go back to it, right? And immediately, madam, your mother craves a word with you, and Juliet will leave, leaving Romeo with the nurse. Look at what Romeo asks. I mean, it tells you a lot about who he is. Who is she? Dude, he doesn't even know who she is. He literally walked up to a girl on the floor of the, and he says, I want to kiss you, and then later I'm going to find out who you are. Wait a minute. Why did Romeo come to the party? To take a look at the most beautiful woman in the world, Rosaline. He doesn't even know she exists anymore. This is very disturbing, just to especially female students of this play. He's totally into Rosaline. He sees Juliet and is totally into Juliet.
Even more so than Rosaline.
Even more so, which obviously begs a question. When a guy looks into a girl's eye and says, I totally love you, blah, 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 blah. The girl, of course, can say, okay, I totally believe that he's saying what he believes what he's saying, but Romeo believed what he was saying. I mean, he totally believed. Remember, Romeo even said, I'm going to kill myself if Rosaline doesn't answer my text. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't even know Rosaline exists. Which obviously begs a really intriguing question. Can girls ever really completely trust when the guy says you're the one? Because he may even mean it. I mean, he probably does mean it at the time, just like with Rosaline. And then he changes his mind just like that. Notice the nurse will say back, married bachelor, her mother's the lady of the house, and a good lady and a wise and virtuous. I nursed her daughter that you talked with all. The nurse is always wanting to talk about how she nursed Juliet. She's kind of proud of that fact. Keep going. I tell you, he that can lay hold of her shall have the chinks, and she usually does this, meaning, boy, if you land Juliet, you're going to land serious money. Why? Because the Capulets are very wealthy. Notice Romeo. He can't believe it. Do you notice how many questions Romeo asks in this part of the play? Is she a Capulet? Oh, dear account, my life is my foe's debt. Read your sidebar and then put it in your own words. What has he just said?
He's vulnerable to the other family.
Well, ostensibly, he's just said,
That's great. I fell in love with my enemy.
I'm screwed. Yeah, I'm screwed. Oh. In other words, oh, this is just great. I finally find a girl who actually will talk back to me on the dance floor. You get the sense Romeo's tried this before. It hasn't worked so well. It might be that he freaked other girls out. It might be that he was waiting to find a girl who could give linguistically right back to him, right, and say it right back to him. You get the sense Juliet's pretty sharp. At the end of the conversation with her mother, for example, she'll say, I'll look alike if looking liking move, which is an interesting line because she follows it up with, but I'll follow you whatever you want me to do. Because I'll look to like if looking liking moves seems to suggest I'll look at him, but if he's butt ugly, don't count me in on this project. In other words, Juliet's kind of got a mind of her own, right? And she knows how to play linguistic games. Now Romeo's like, oh, this is just great. I finally find the girl. And she's a Capulet? Are you kidding me? Go.
Going back to the fact that the whole I'll follow you, whatever you say, does that suggest that she's maybe afraid of her mother?
Could be. And of course, she's obviously, as we'll find out later, she's in a tight spot. I mean, if her dad and mom tell her she's going to marry Paris, guess what?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can play all the games they want to with, we'll let you decide. But most kids have said that. I kind of know this. I live in a house where I'm given a choice as long as I make the right choice. Honey, we totally trust you until we don't. That is to say, you better not screw this up. In other words, make this choice and it can be your choice, but let's make sure it's the right choice, right? You wouldn't want to disappoint us. You wouldn't want to let us down. There's all kinds of great language parents can use to make it real clear. Yeah, you got a choice, but it ain't really a choice. It's called, we're asking you to make sure that you do what you know you should do. Look at how Romeo comes back. Benvolio runs up, and he says, dude, we got to get away. Let's go. away be gone, the sport is at the best means what? What do you think? Can you read between the lines what this means? The sport is at the best. Have they been invited to this party officially? No, they're crashing the party.
They finally got caught.
You got it. So in other words, dude, we got to get out of here. We're about to get jacked. Who maybe is responsible for that?
Tibble.
You got it. Tibble, right? In other words, Tibble start to look around. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. we got too many uninvited people here. Notice Romeo. Ah, so I fear. Romeo is not talking at all about crashing the party. The sport is at the best here for him means what? Crap. Nuts. I thought I had a chance. Now, look what he says next. The more is my unrest. As if it wasn't bad enough. Now I've seen the next girl I'm in love with and... Notice, Capulet. Nay, gentlemen, prepare not to be gone. Interesting, Juliet's daddy says, no, guys, stick around. This is no big deal. We're going to have a good time. What? It's no big deal. Irony, right? It's no big deal. Juliet's daddy is the one asking for them all to stay. Notice Juliet will say, come hither, nurse. What is that young gentleman? She never got his name either. Who is he? The son and heir of old Tibero. Well, what's he that's going out the door? Mary, I think he be young Petruchio. In other words, he's naming the people as they're leaving, right? And Juliet, what's he that follows there? That would not dance. That's interesting. Romeo was told us he ain't coming to this to dance, and he doesn't dance. So while he's not dancing, he's looking at girls who are dancing and sees Juliet. Notice the nurse says, I don't know who he is. Notice, go ask him his name. And then look at what Juliet says next on 829, 830. And this tells us a lot about Juliet's character as Shakespeare's created her. If he is married, my grave is like to be my wedding bed?
So she wants to die if he's already with somebody.
Whoa! Do you see what she just said? Right. If he's not the guy, then I hope I just die. Now jot down in your notes, what do you see as similar between Romeo and Juliet? If you will, they're a match made in the stars. They are star-crossed lovers. In other words, she's seen him for all of 7 lines. He's given her a kiss. And she now says, if I can't be with him, I just rather die. Now this says something to us about both of these kids. What do you think? What point is Shakespeare making about kids? And it's kind of hard sometimes for freshmen in high school to read this play, because they feel a little bit like Shakespeare's poking them in the eye a little bit and saying, this is what it means to be a freshman in high school. We make our decisions very quickly, and then we unmake them just as quickly. We're rash, to use the language. Notice, the nurse comes back and says, his name is Romeo, and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy. Notice he's the only son, right? Juliet will say something quite interesting. My only love, sprung from my only hate, which is Shakespeare's continuation of the hyperbole or the oxymoronic language about love. Remember earlier, heavy lightness. Remember all those paradoxes, oxymorons. Notice here, my only love sprung from my only hate. Too early seen unknown, and known too late, exclamation mark. These all lines have exclamation mark. What does it mean that she says too early seen unknown and known too late? To know too late means what? It's done. It's done. It's done. She's already made up her mind. Look at the next line. Prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy. And by the way, do you see that little mark above the E on loathed? The reason is so that we can get the iambic pentameter. See, listen to it. Prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Remember, we're playing our iambic pentameter game. And loathe is actually the way you say the word, but that little mark will give us the extra accent so we can get the full iambic pentameter. That I must love a loathed enemy. Nurse asks, what's this? What's this? She overhears Juliet saying, she's like, whoa, 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 what did you just say? Juliet says, a rhyme I learnt even now. She made it up, in other words, she says, of one I danced withal. And then the nurse says, okay, okay, and then let's away, the strangers are all gone, and that's the end of it. Now, what are we going to say in conclusion about this scene? Shakespeare in Act 1 is setting us up for the rest of the action of the play. But what can you already predict has to happen given these two young people? Can you write it down? I mean, you know already what's going to happen, but what can you predict given the, what's the language we're going to use? Is it passion? I mean, earlier it was rashness. This begs a really intriguing question. Let's put it down for our question at 3B. Do you believe in the concept of love at first sight? Love at first sight. Now, when we use that phrase, what do we mean? Love at first sight means what? Well, yeah, it is Romeo and Juliet. This is the play of all plays that play the game of love at first sight. In other words, you see the person and you immediately know you're in love. Now, where does this idea come from? Plato, the great Greek philosopher, has a famous dialogue called Symposium. This you'll want in your notes. Symposium. Because you're honor students, we share intel like this with you. This is a famous dialogue where the question is simply, what is love? A multitude of answers are given. One of the answers that's given remains quite remarkable even to today. Plato knew this answer. It runs something like this. Before you were born into a body, you were a soul or a spirit, a piece of energy, if you will. Okay? You were perfect, geometrically speaking, which for the Greeks means you were a perfect sphere, like a globe, a ball, got me, of energy. Before your birth, that ball is cut in half. Half of that ball went into you and animated your life, gives you your life force, your energy. The other half of that ball went into someone else. At the moment of your birth, you both are born. Do you got me? You both are born. Now, the Greeks thought of this animating force the way you think of magnets, right? So, for example, if you take two magnets and you put them together, they are attracted, right? They come, and then boom. Now, if you turn their polar, right, you try and push them together, what happens to the magnets? They repel. For the Greeks, then, this becomes the observation, the mythology of what we call soulmates. S-O-U-L. Soulmates. Now, what's ironic about this is that students often know about this. They just didn't know this idea came from the Greeks and best articulated in Plato's Symposium. And it runs something like this. You go out into the world, you grow up. Your part of your soul, someone else has the other part of your soul. You begin to meet people. The Greeks said this explains why there is such a thing as instant attraction, right? Or instant not so good attraction. Or why two people can get together at Worland High School and like each other for a while, but then it goes apart. The Greeks will say about that, it was not, quote unquote, meant to be. See, that language comes from this notion, not meant to be. In other words, it didn't fit. It didn't go together well. Now, Shakespeare is going to play a nasty game with us because he's going to show on stage these two come together and immediately it's like the two magnets fitting perfectly together. Yes? They will later, of course, consummate all of this both by the church as well as, of course, physically, right? So they sleep together, etc., etc. They do all of that, of course, without ever telling parents. We'll get into that discussion later, right? But the argument is they're soulmates. They go together perfectly. And yet, tragically, doesn't work out in the end for them to stay alive. They would, however, rather die together than live apart because there is a certain kind of magnetism that has brought them together. Now, a 3B obvious question is, do you buy that notion? Do you believe there is such a thing? And by the way, why would people who believe in arranged marriages not like this idea?
Because they...
What are arranged marriages? You got it. The parent goes out and chooses. How does the parent choose? On what grounds normally?
Money.
Issues of currency, right? Got me? Let's listen now to this final scene. Follow it. Here we go.
And this holy shrine, the gentle scene is this, while next to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth the rough touch with a gentle kiss.
Good pilgrim, you wrong your hand too much. Which manly devotion shows in this? For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holding palmer's kiss.
And like saints' lips lips and holy palmers too.
Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer.
Oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair.
Saints, do not move, though grant for prayer's sake.
Then, move not while my prayer's effect I take. Thus from my lips by thine my sin is purged.
Then have my lips the sin that they have told.
Sin from my lips of trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again.
Madam, your mother craves a word with you.
What is her mother?
Married bachelor, the mother is the lady of the house. And a good lady, and a wise and virtuous. I nurse her daughter that you talked with all. I tell you, he that can lay hold of her shall have the cheeks.
Is she a Capulet? Oh dear Count, my life is my false debt.
Away, be calm, the sport is of the best.
Aye, so I fear the more is my unrest.
Nay, gentlemen, prepare not to be gone. We have a trifling foolish banquet toward. This being so, why then I thank you all, I thank you honest gentlemen. Good night. Good night. More torches here. Come on, let's to bed. Still by my faith in Christ. I am to my rest.
To the nest. What is yon gentleman? The solitaire of old-time burial.
But he that now is going out of door.
That I think the young Petruchio.
What's he that follows there that would not dance?
I know not.
Go ask his name. He belongs at my grave of last remember.
His name is Romeo and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy.
My only love, son of my only hope. Dwelling still unknown, unknown to death. Prodigious birth of love it seems that I must love and loathe with enemy.
That's it.
A rhyme I learned even now of one I danced with all.
Juliet, and on. Come, let's away. The strangers all are gone.
To finish now, it begs a really intriguing question. Why watch the NASCAR train wreck that we know is coming? Like, why? You know it's coming, right? And you know from the opening prologue lines, this ain't going to end well, so why watch it?
Because you're actually kind of hoping for them
Yeah.
to...
There's,
For them.
there is some element of hope.
Yeah,
That
they're
what?
That they'll end up together. That it'll be a happy ending. Yeah.
Now let's jot down at 3A a line from the great English poet Tennyson. We'll study this together when we're seniors, but go ahead and write it down now and we can fight about it later. He said it this way. It's better, you maybe have heard this line in fact, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. This is a famous line from Tennyson's In Memoriam. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Now, when we look at Romeo and Juliet, we will ask, does a line like that make sense to you? 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Right? Of course, next, we're going to open up Act 2, and that act's going to go very quickly, as Romeo and Juliet then will have a, how does one say it? Conversation.